layers on top of that.
Absolutely. I'm actually going to start with the last thing you said first, if that's okay. I think whenever it comes to the differences between women and men's sports and the different types of like funding and things of that nature, it really comes down to like identity. Something that I really like to emphasize to our players is that like they're so much more than an Ivy League student, so much more than an athlete. And comparison is the quickest thief of joy. And so like I think the reality of that, and also our coach likes to use this phrase a lot, like we are team bus one. So like whoever's in the practice facility, whoever's showing up to the games, like whoever's a part of making the magic that we see on the court, like that is team bus one, and like that is our focus. And so I think not like comparing ourselves to that, but then also I think our coach is very justice forward. She's very much so inclined to make a name for like women's sports, and I do think that we are in a really cool space right now to see women's sports evolving. And so I don't think it's necessarily like just like, oh well, we're just not going to compare and just like walk in la la land and ignore. But I think it's also recognizing that everything that we see is more systemic than it is anything. And so like with my legal background, because things are very systemic, like you can't really get so overworked with like what you see in the present that you don't also enjoy the present. And so I try to encourage them to like have the ability to like speak up for like what discrepancies you see, but also don't allow the temptation to compare to steal the joy of the moment. And so that's my answer to the second question. Could you say more about the first? I'm sorry, I can't remember.
No, you're good. You're, I think, unique, not necessarily unique, I would say, but so the BTI has 11 schools here in Boston. Harvard is, I call them my pluralism babies. They're my most, it's Harvard Divinity School, but that means all divinities at all times. And it's intense, it's a lot. And that's such a unique environment because not only are you potentially living on a team and in a culture that is pluralist and diverse, that's real for all of us, but you're in a training ground that specifically is unaligned, right? That has a way of being that, for me in higher education, is unique. And so how do you not only navigate a depth of dedication to a form of pluralism, which I think is unique in chaplaincy, and then second, with women athletes, especially Black women athletes, a lot of that intersectionality comes into our identities and into our bodies, and it's another layer of accompaniment and discernment with your athletes. So not only is the diversity like functioning as a structural reality, but it's an embodied reality that your athletes are dealing with.
Absolutely. I would say, again, to your last question, I don't know why you keep doing that, but when I think about our athletes, I'm reminded of last year's election. And whenever I think about chaplaincy, I always like to say that chaplaincy isn't talking someone off of a ledge, but it's sitting with them on it. And so I think with our students who look like me specifically last year, it was more so not even talking about what happened, but more so just kind of like sitting with them in their feelings. And so I think that a lot of it is that, or like what happened with like Claudine Gay. Like there's just been a lot of like things that have transpired and like not a lot of time to process, being that the world is on fire. And so I think that oftentimes it looks like not even having to like explain or process or offer these like high academic thoughts, but more so to just like be present in the feelings and to sit with those. I think that I've been very privileged to be in different internship experiences that have expanded my view of what ministry looks like and what it looks like to actually fill my cup as a Christian in a pluralistic space. And so I'm reminded of whenever I was doing CPE at Boston Medical Center. And Boston Medical Center is like a place where you don't necessarily have to have insurance to be seen. So it's a really great space. But a lot of times, like ministry would look like listening to a song, or reading a book, or talking about history. And so I think those different experiences have helped me to connect with our team in such a way to where, I'm gonna share an example. So I remember my first year with the basketball team, and I was traveling with them, and one of my roommates one time was one of our coaches. And I brought my Bible out to read it, as I always do, minding my own business. And she looks at me and she's like, "You know the Bible is BS, right?" And I was like, "Okay, here we go. This is chaplaincy." But I see that as such a big ministry moment because that was 2 years ago, and like we're still having conversations about the Bible today. And I'm not saying that it's like no longer BS to her, but me not coming at her like, well, no, it's actually this, this, and this. Instead of like doing that, I offered curiosity and like kind of got to the heart of the matter, which is kind of what Cynthia was talking about earlier. And so I think that that's a really good example of what it looks like to provide spiritual care in secular spaces. It doesn't always look like a Bible study. Like, it would be great if we could just all like kumbaya and go to Bible study and like have a good time. But I think that it's actually doing a lot for me as a Christian to be in spaces where like I oftentimes don't say Jesus, but he's there. And like getting to see how he provides opportunities for me to kind of like share my faith in ways to where I actually have to be fruitful. So like, I'm not gonna say Jesus, but I'm gonna be kind. I'm not gonna say Jesus, but I'm gonna be like loving and like kind of offer those kinds of opportunities. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting space. But I think kind of also to what you said is just presence. I think earlier this season, as it was starting, I was in our coach's office and she was talking about her game plan for practice and all the things she has to do. And I don't remember what I asked her, but she just kind of made the comment that as the leader, like no one checks on her. And I think that that was like really huge for her to even share that she doesn't feel like people check on her. And so that kind of highlighted an opportunity for me to not read the Bible or invite her to church, but just to be present and like be someone who checks on her. And so, yeah, I think that being present and I think curiosity, that's my like one of my favorite words. And so I really like to spend like my one-on-one time checking in with our players, coaches, and support staff with just seeing like what it is that I can provide. And oftentimes I don't know until they actually tell me. So it could be that you're stressed out about your biochem exam and like that's the spiritual care for the day. Or it could be that your mom's cancer returned and like we're gonna talk about that. But it's more so just kind of like being present with them in the moment and seeing what is brought up. So.
That's great. Michael, I'd like to ask you to pick up on this idea of accompaniment a little bit from an administrative standpoint. We often look at this type of care as targeted specifically at individual athletes and athletes alone. And often that athlete literally alone in their own journey, like individually with a chaplain, right? The ways in which I have encountered it, maybe just even in pop culture, it tends to be in the ways y'all have described it. Do you see in your different schools that you've been at and the different roles you've served in those institutions, a way for chaplaincy to consider its expansion, or a way that you've seen it serving a different role in the different spaces that you've been in, that gets at some of what Drew and Shariah have pointed out, that there's a bunch, and Cynthia too, there's a bunch of humans in this body trying to work together, and we've kind of constrained this spiritual care in a very narrow way. And have you been able as an administrator to see some opportunities where you might see the field going, where you might want to see it expand? Anything from the top down, as we say?
I don't know if I would say I'm at the top. However, I will say, I will say each institution I've been, you know, except for Boston College has always had the spiritual part there. There's always been a need for spiritual care, and the spiritual care starts with the students and athletes, but it really expands to the coaches, it expands to the administrators. You know, when I got to Maryland, you know, the Fellowship of Christian Athlete rep was there, and how do we get this here at Maryland? And so there's some conversation there, and I'm over in the Gossip Football Team House there, which is separate from where the most of the athletic department happened to be. And over time, you know, we were able to get Bryce Bevel that was there, and then you see how that impacts our students and some of the challenges that they're having on a day-to-day basis that may have had them in the academic support office, because academic support, once you get tutoring taken care of and the graduation plans taken care of, you're really just dealing with a person, right? There's certain pieces that actually have to happen, but when we're not together holistically, and usually when I say holistically, there's that spiritual part that is a component of it. But in society, we kind of push that to the back, you know, hey, mind, body, okay, let's just end it right there, you know. And what ends up happening is that this shows up more so in mental health, all right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there are some real challenges. People have mental health or mental illness or whatnot, but some of this is really students who are unable to cope with the different challenges in life, partly because of a spiritual piece that is missing. And that doesn't necessarily say it has to be in any one faith tradition,
Right.
but that inner voice, what does that look like? And then also the purpose and what are you trying to do? I think when you work with student athletes or you work with athletes at a high level and work with coaches, it really brings a different perspective when, in the Christian faith tradition, we talk about what profits a man to gain the whole world and to lose his soul. And you're seeing this quite often with people as they're at the mountaintop. They have it all, but what it takes to get to that mountaintop, the sacrifice that is, they're reconciling with that. Right? And then that identity being, I'm this football coach or I'm this athlete, the purpose beyond that is not even explored. Right? And so I think as we look at this continuing to grow, it's one, how we begin to talk about understanding the inner voice. That doesn't necessarily have to be within the faith tradition, but having roles and that go outside of the mental health realm. Because I do think when we say, okay, well, spiritual part, we're just going to put that in mental health, it puts a box around that. Because now that falls within sports medicine, it falls within HIPAA, it falls within some of these other different things, and so you can't really create a community around that. I think as an administrator, you can hire the right people, that helps. Like the people that you're looking for, are they caring for the whole person, or is this a person that just wants to come in and just do their job and that's just it? I think people matter. But I do think in general, as we begin to expand on just care for the whole person and everything that goes along with that, I think it opens up space for sport chaplains.
You are a Jesuit school. Cura personalis, baby. We have time for a couple audience questions. If anybody wants to know more about one of our panelists, if anyone has a pressing question about the future of these three wonderful humans or what they're thinking about.
Well, for those of you who have access to athletes and staff and personnel, I'm curious to know more about the specific messages you bring them in chapel services, on walks. So that song you played, what song was it? And in chapel, for example, how's attendance and what message do you think resonated best with your community, the patrons?
No, I mean there's a whole array of topics. So like my last year, we spent the whole season going through the book of Philippians. For each of them, they're thinking about how do I integrate my faith into everything. And so that was part of my discourse with the guys is, as you shared earlier, that you're more than just an athlete. You're a father, potential husband if you're not already, your friend, and how do you lean into each of those different areas? And the blessing that I had was Gerard Mayo was also a Christian. And so when we had our coaches chapel, he was always in the front row asking questions, which was great. But he recognized that there was a need to also, they really enjoyed chapel. And so part of the discourse was, how do we help some of our other players who really, really need this and often making really bad decisions and choices? How do we impact them as well? And so my last year, they also tasked me with bringing a leadership development program to the guys to impact the entire team. So not just the Christian players. And I'll say some of my favorite conversations were with guys who weren't Christians, who were just exploring life, talking about how do I think about my finances, how do I think about my platform, how do I think about my situation, because a bunch of women are reaching out on IG and I'm trying to make it, like those are the conversations that we had real talk, right? To kind of help them think about the long-term plan of life and not just think about now. And in one case, we had a young man who I knew when we signed another player that this guy was gonna get cut because he was flashy. He was a rookie, he was wearing his gold chain, he was riding on a veteran bus and he was a rookie. And I thought to myself, this guy's gonna get cut. And sure enough, he made it the entire season. And when the new season rolled around that March, they signed a guy and said, this is his replacement. And sure enough, he got cut. Because there are a lot of guys who are professionals, but they don't realize they're professionals until it's too late. So,
I wish I had like a great, like, it was a poor song choice. Like, in the sense of like, it was just like, maybe like Meg Thee Stallion or like Saweetie, I'm not gonna lie. That's why I let you go first, because it was gonna be super spiritual. But instead of dismissing the song that she chose, because I actually had to, this was when I was at the hospital, so I know you asked for student athletes, so this is just an example of you asked for the song. I had to leave the room to go get my phone, because usually I wouldn't take my phone with me. But she really wanted to hear the song. And so it was a song about like being an independent woman or something like that. And instead of like being like, oh, this is interesting, and like leaving the room after, I asked her questions, and like it actually turned out that she was feeling like less of a woman because of her situation, and so it actually led to a really meaningful conversation. But with our athletes, we have, it's cool because it's kind of like an organization, so they have like team values and things like that. I oftentimes call myself a culture coach, and so I kind of serve as like a liaison between our coaches and our players. So I have like this like level of trust with our coaches to where like they will tell me what they're like looking for in our players and like what's missing. But then I also can go in the locker room and blend in, and they don't try to doctor their conversations because I'm in the place. And so I would say that a lot of the messages that I've shared in the past have been correlated to like unity or grit or joy or our different team values. But if there's something specific that our coach is like, we're really just like not like getting it together when it comes to like being selfless or something, I'll try to like do that. But to kind of like add like to not make it super Christian, I like to lean on like different quotes by different players or different sports or even like different sayings that our coaches will say. I think one time I had our Dobo tell me one of her favorite quotes, and from what she said, I actually got to like make a chapel from it. And so trying to be creative in that way and get more people involved. So
That's awesome. Thank you.
Any final questions?
Hi, I'm Zach Holden. I go to American University and I study under Onaje Bofine, if you know. But 3 years ago, like I set out my dreams as becoming a sports chaplain, more specifically with basketball. And I was thinking like what I center around at American University now is that like I learned in a poll that 80% of college students see themselves as spiritual and not religious. And I just see this as a trend like with my generation, like a younger generation. And it's like I think it has to do with distrust and like the social media age. But it's like we feel something but we don't know what it is. And so I try to center around that. And when I think about I believe in manifestation. When I think about what I'm going to look like as a spiritual chaplain in the NBA, hopefully, like I want to offer or like redefine what a sports chaplain could be. So I see myself like working with herbal medicine, or like I've begun qigong or stretching and breathwork practices. And I'm just thinking, since you guys are in the space, if you see an opportunity for that to be part of what what a sports chaplain does.
I would say yes. Like I think one of our coaches is huge into like meditation, and so something that she does with our players is she'll do a guided meditation before games. And I think that as a chaplain, she's not a chaplain, but like I think for ethical spiritual care, it is important to ensure that you are not enforcing spiritual practices that not all of your players align with. I think that just like you wouldn't want like a Christian to come in and just tell you to pray, I think that oftentimes there are things that might not be seen as religious, like yoga, to just like have players do, but like those are actual spiritual practices. And so I think that my advice to you would just be to, I think that chaplaincy can be expansive. It's not just a Christian thing to do, but I would just say to really like focus on ethics and how you can make your care, your practice of care, holistic enough to where everyone is reached and everyone can participate in a way that is not causing them to compromise what it is that they believe. That would be my advice, but excited for you.
No, I think it's well said. I think as you think about the future of chaplaincy, and obviously there are many models of how someone could direct their efforts. The reality is it has to be something that the team wants, and that's the big question, right? If there are players like, for example, I remember with the I think it was the Lakers under Phil Jackson. They had some practices that are very similar to what you're talking about, because it really depends on the leader and the type of tone that they're trying to address, whether it be locker room, field, or other environment. And so, my encouragement would be to, continue to learn and develop, the skills and the assets that you have, the practices that you believe in, and continue that process. Because it may lead to an NBA locker room, or it may even lead to something bigger than that. You just never know.
Let's thank our panel.
I don't know about y'all, but I can listen to y'all all night.
That's right.
Let's give another round of applause to our panelists here. I know I have a ton of questions bubbling up, but I will save those for later. I just want to thank y'all for spending your afternoon with us and listening to the folks and the wisdom that they poured into us, but also for the work that they're doing out in the world. And I want to especially thank the Black Sports Ministry Network for hosting this, all of our sponsors, and I want to also remind you, as the Black Sports Ministry is a nonprofit that is growing, that there are opportunities to donate. There are opportunities to donate, as we have heard from several of our panelists, that there are other well-funded organizations out there doing work, right? And how can we leverage our potential in meeting those folks?